Okay, so I think it's time to start. I'd like to start by you're welcome to our scientific advisory committee members. So we have two in person and one is with us via Skype. So that's Kurt Callan. Can you hear me? Kurt? Well, maybe he's not with us anymore. All right.
Do you have a microphone?
Microphone is in the computer. Oh, well. Anyway, we're going to start by So we'll start with this. I will start with giving a presentation here for about 40 minutes, half an hour to 40 minutes, about the Institute, our setup here, and how things have been developing since we started here. We will then continue with some presentations of the research groups, the main research groups here, by members of our faculty. We'll take a short break, and then we will have a discussion with the faculty and some board members this afternoon. And then the plan is to have more of the committee with us via Skype again. Okay, but let me just start with a few general words about what we view as Nodita's mission. These are taken from some strategy documents that we have released over the years. And so our overriding mission is, of course, to do first-rate research. We then have also, of course, as our mission is to, this is a Nordic Institute, and we want to build on and build up Nordic capabilities in theoretical physics. Nodita has a history of being important in promoting new emergent areas in physics. And maybe the best example is that Nodita played an instrumental role in the introduction of astrophysics into the Nordic countries in the 70s and early build-up of that. Later examples would include biological physics and complex systems. I think it's very important that we have an eye on this role. Another thing that Nodita tries to achieve through its operations is to bring together, the Nordic countries are fairly small, the research groups are spread out, and we like to help as much as we can in bringing together people to get critical mass, if you like, in specialized areas. This can be both in terms of research, but also in terms of advanced courses and research training. And then, I guess that was my last point here, so we can move to the next slide. Now, in order to achieve these goals, we have to make sure that at all times the Institute remains flexible, is ready to move in a new direction, and sees opportunities as they present themselves. It has to be, if we want to operate at the level of research that we aspire to, we have to remain attractive to good researchers at all levels, both senior researchers, but also the more junior, down to postdoctoral and graduate students level. Now, we are a Nordic Institute, and as such, we have to make sure that we stay relevant to our community. So we should keep a healthy focus on the local environment, but of course that should not be to the exclusion of us. The physics should of course come first before the regional issues. But in order to have any of these, we need to be stable, both organizationally and financially. In in recent years, of course, has not been clear. I think things are stabilizing, but we still have a way to go to sort of see in front of us a clear and steady path. Okay. Now, we have been investing a lot of our resources in recent years in what we call scientific programs and workshops of various types. And I think this is very appropriate for an institute like Nordita, because this notion that of collaboration, it's been clear, of course, for a while in experimental subjects, but I think in theory also is becoming more and more appreciated that collaboration is key, and this is witnessed by the many program type centers that are being run around the world. We have, of course, the ITP in Santa Barbara, around longest maybe. We have the Isaac Newton Institute, the Galileo Institute, Institute for Nuclear Theory. These last two are, of course, perhaps more specialized. They're focusing on particular areas of physics. And we have the Venture Institute, and the list goes on. And Nordita is, we would like Nordita to be a corresponding center for the Nordic region. So we have activities, we run scientific programs. I'll talk more about those later on. They are where we bring in 20, 25 people at a time, usually for a month up to 2 months, and they focus on a particular area. And those areas can be not just standard core areas of theoretical physics. We can actually, we've had programs in a very broad range of theoretical natural science, you could say, and this, I think, is a way for the Institute to be relevant and to engage with a much larger section of the scientific community than we could through just the efforts of our own people here. And in all of these programs here, we have, as I said, we focus not exclusively, but we do emphasize that to involve the Nordic community, and I think this is reasonable because that is the local environment here, and this is, of course, also the community that is supporting us. And then we, in addition to running these maybe more outward-directed activities, we have in-house research and in-house research training. We have a number of postdoctoral positions, and we also have PhD students. Right. And then finally, we have a tradition. Nordita has a long-standing tradition to run summer schools and winter schools, and we're continuing that also here. Right. Let me very briefly run through the history of the Institute. So it has been around since the late 50s. It started as the Nordic Institute for Theoretical Atomic Physics, so that's where the A comes from in our acronym. And it was located at the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen. And it was started actually as to compensate the Bohr Institute and Niels Bohr himself for losing the theory division of CERN, which was originally in Copenhagen, but was then moved to be closer to the experimental activities in Geneva. And the Nordic countries got together and decided to start an institute at that time. Now, back in 1957, or late 50s, the institute was quite different, and it operated in a very different way from today. But it has had a long history, and quite an impressive one for its size, I would say. And it has lived up to this notion of being flexible. As I said in the beginning, it has changed with the times, and it has even, in some cases, moved ahead of the times and spearheaded change in the Nordic countries in physics. And in particular, the scope has broadened beyond just atomic physics. And but the focus has always been on basic theoretical physics, and that remains today also. Even though in our program activities we certainly do, and we like to cater to a broader range to both our experimental colleagues and also beyond traditional physics, our basic theoretical physics is an institute of theoretical physics, first and foremost, and that remains. Okay, now there were some changes in the political environment in the Nordic countries, the Nordic collaboration. Basically, up until 2006, Nordita was owned and directly operated by the Nordic governments. There's an institution that's called the Nordic Council of Ministers that owned this institute and funded it directly in Copenhagen. They decided in the sort of years leading up to 2006 to move out of the business, for the most part, of owning institutes, and wanted them to move to the local universities. And this was not just Nordita, there was a long list of these institutes in various subjects. While they would continue to support them, but at a reduced level. So at the moment we are getting about 50% of the financial support from the Nordic Council of Ministers, as the institute used to get back in 2007 days. But after some fairly complicated story, at the end of the day, the institute did not move to the University of Copenhagen, which perhaps would have been expected to be the most natural thing, but instead it was deemed a better option to come here. And since 2007, Nordita has been in Stockholm. Hosted jointly by the university, Stockholm University, and the Royal Institute of Technology. So the institute is no longer owned jointly by the Nordic countries. It is owned by these two universities, but there is a lot of, it remains Nordic in many ways. Bulk of the funding comes from the Nordic countries. There is a Nordic board that makes strategic decisions for the institute, and we will come to that a bit later on. It is located in the Albanova University Center, which of course is here right next door. We are now getting our funding, as I said before. A lot of it comes from the Nordic Council of Ministers. Roughly 50% of what we need for our operations comes from them, continues to come from there. But this is through 4-year contracts. The current contract is 2010 through 13. And beyond that, that renewal is subject, of course, there will be an evaluation. But there, of course, can also be political shifts that can affect the future. So the future is, I would say, more uncertain now than it was in the old days in Copenhagen. But on the other hand, the history shows us that the future was also uncertain there. Okay. So, let me move on here. Well, anyway, here's a picture of the... we're now sitting in this building here. This is the main Nordita building, and this here is the Albanova Center, which houses most of physics and parts of chemistry and biological sciences, I believe, for both Stockholm University and the Royal Institute. And if you then want to see this is then on a larger scale, central Stockholm is roughly here. All right. Now, so what is it that we do? Well, we have researchers here. So our main thing is that we have a number of both senior and junior researchers who work here full time, and we'll say more about that in a minute. But it is no longer just an institute of theoretical atomic physics. We are doing research, both theoretical and computational, in a variety of subjects. It's astrophysics, condensed matter physics, biological physics, statistical physics, complex systems, subatomic physics, cosmology, and gravitational theory, and there are cross-disciplinary projects between various fields. Right. Good. And but in addition to this research, now this is a small institute, and you'll see that I'm able to list. Basically, I can list all our staff here on one page, so it's not a large institute. But we are able to go beyond the range of activities of this rather limited number of people by running what we call supplemental activities. The most important of these are these so-called scientific programs. These are programs that I mentioned before. where we focus on particular problems for extended period, usually a month, up to 2 months. We get a combination, usually it's about 20-25 people come in at a time. Of those, there will be a core of internationally recognized leaders in the field, from both, some of them can be from the Nordic countries, but also from anywhere in the world. Then we will, to anchor it in the Nordic community, we make sure there's usually some fraction of invited Nordic participants. These senior participants will bring with them some junior people, usually postdocs, even graduate students. And then these are open in the sense that anybody can apply to participate in a program, and there should be, and there is a method for them selecting, if needed, among the applicants. Okay. It is also, let me postpone, I'll say more about the programs in a minute. But in addition to these extended programs, we have shorter events like the workshops. They can be 2 or 3 day affairs with just a handful of people, to being week-long conferences with a couple of hundred participants. It's been anywhere in that range. And usually for the larger events, we are not alone. Then we usually are then co-sponsoring or co-organizing them with other institutes here in the neighborhood or in further afield. Okay. And then, last but not least, we have a visitor program, and that's quite a vigorous program. We have, in addition to these programs and workshops, we also just have a steady stream of visitors, both short-term visits, we have seminar speakers and the like, but also usually each year several more long-term. Those are usually senior people who are here from a month or maybe even up to a semester. Okay. So here's the research staff. So we have, there's the director, which is a time-limited position. I will finish my 3-year term this summer. I've been invited by the board to stay another 3-year period. And then the long-term, the senior people are here, the professors. And Axel Brandenburg came with the institute from Copenhagen. Kostya Zarembo, who's sitting at the back of the hall here, he joined us last fall. John Hertz remained behind in Copenhagen, but he is working for Nordita there. We pay his salary, and he spends a significant part of his time here in Stockholm as ongoing collaborations here. And Matthias Reinhardt is temporary. He's a visiting professor. Will be here for I think a total of 2 years. And he's part of the ERC advanced grant project that Axel Brandenburg is running. And you'll notice that this ERC project actually represents about 1/3 of our staff right now. There are 4 PhD students, 2 postdocs, and 1 assistant professor and a senior professor. So this is a major impact on the institute, and especially the astrophysics effort. Now we're fortunate to have Paolo Di Vecchia and Chris Petek, who are retired. Both of them are active here full time. So Paolo spends most of his time here in Stockholm. Chris, on the other hand, is based in Copenhagen.
So what does NN mean? Can you explain it?
Good. Very important. There's the plans for setting up the institute in Stockholm. They call for having a total of 3 senior people here, and they were to be recruited. Well, Axel came with the institute, and the other 2 were to be recruited more or less in step with the retirements of the people in Copenhagen. And so we already have Zarembo in place, but we advertised last fall, with a deadline last fall, a position in condensed matter theory. And we are in the final stages, I hope, of completing that recruitment. We have, there were 64 applications were received, those have been evaluated, and there were interviews held, and because these positions here, by the way, are not, they are professorships, but they are professorships at one of the local universities here, either Stockholm University, Royal Institute, or actually Uppsala University is also a possibility for these positions. So that makes the appointment procedure a little bit convoluted, but at the end of the day, each of these professors will select one of these universities to be their home institution, if you like, and then they are on leave from that institution to work at Nordita indefinitely. And so we are now, so there's also, that means, so there's a special appointment committee which Nordita has a lot of representation on, but also these three universities. That committee has met during the spring. They have selected a candidate, and this is Alexander Balatsky of the Los Alamos National Lab in the US. He's actually arriving here in Stockholm tomorrow to meet with us and meet with the president of the university. So I will try to arrange for him to meet with you also. Okay. So the idea is that he would either Balatsky or well, let's assume it's Balatsky. We'll start here. It's probably optimistic that he'll be starting in 2011, but early 2012.
Do you anticipate replacing John Hertz?
Well, that's Balatsky basically.
It's already done.
Well, the thing is, because of the 50% reduction in sort of, I hesitate to say guaranteed, but the long-term funding that's stable, it seemed prudent to reduce the number of the senior people. There used to be 5 or 6 in Copenhagen, so we cannot replace them one by one-on-one. But I think, partly based on recommendations from this committee, it was decided to start the recruitments a little bit ahead of time to get some overlap. And so, whether you view Balatsky or whoever we managed to recruit as a replacement for John Hertz or for Chris Petek or for Alan Luther, who retired some years ago, is a bit of a matter of, well, it's not so clear. Okay. Then we have, as was also the case in Copenhagen, there were temporary positions. They were called assistant professors. I believe they were 3+3-year appointments there. Here they are just 5-year fixed-term appointments. And we have 5 of them on the Nordita budget, and then the ERC grant also pays for one of these positions now. And we've filled those positions. In fact, already one of our first assistant professors, Stefan Hoffmann, has already been offered and has taken up a tenured position in Germany, in Munich. And this is, of course, what these positions have traditionally been about. These are opportunities for researchers to come and spend an extended time, but a finite time at Nordita and do good work, and basically then move on to regular senior positions. And this, at least we now see that this can also work here. Then we have one of our former fellows. In fact, Yasser, he sits right there now.
This is a question. Sabine, I noticed in the report with gravitational physics. That's now changed to high energy physics.
Well, okay, that's because I cannibalized this thing from. She is sort of on the border between the. Some of her work has been on black holes provided in colliders. Is that high energy physics or is it gravitational physics? Yeah. So, well, she is also on parental leave now, which there is no supposing. She is here right now for a month, I think, but she had twins back in December, so. Jani Petrimatikainen is also on parental leave. Okay. Now, we have this notion of corresponding fellows. These are people who are employed elsewhere, but for various reasons want to have a close connection to us, will come as regular visitors, and basically when a corresponding fellow is here at the Institute, they are part of the faculty. They are invited to faculty meetings, and they can propose workshops and the like our faculty. And this was a category that the Institute had in Copenhagen. It has been revived here, and Our first corresponding fellow, as I said, is Yasu Rudi, who used to be a Nodita fellow, postdoctoral fellow, but is now working in Trondheim at the Kavli Institute for Neuroscience, right? And happens to be here today. But then we have our Nodita fellows. These are 2-year positions. At the moment, we have 11 postdoctoral positions that are funded by the Institute, and then there are 2 more that are on the ERC grant. And you will see presentations by 5 fellows tomorrow, and then George Hammer is also giving one of the presentations tomorrow. All right. Now we have PhD students. Now the basic Nodita funding does not cover PhD students, but we have, so all of these are based on grants. 4 of them are with the ERC grant. I have a PhD student here who's funded by a grant from the Research Council in Iceland. And we have here a student who is being co-supervised by Janne Petri, Matikainen, grant from the Swedish Research Council. And then Eddie Ardon has just selected a student. He also has a grant from the Swedish Research Council for a PhD student studying basically now. Okay. Now, let me just very quickly now go through some of these deliverables. Now, for the in-house research, I will show you some data on basically we post all the papers that are produced at the Institute on an archive, and so we can follow back actually 15 years, sort of at least the volume of production, and then quality is harder to gauge, but overwhelming majority of the papers that are posted to this archive, are then subsequently published in referee journals, some of them in referee conference proceedings. But these are sort of the areas that we're mostly focusing on these days. Now, in the scientific programs, as I mentioned before, they cover a very wide range of topics. We are running them now at the level of, the average for the last 4 years now has been 8 months a year. Seem to be able to handle that reasonably well. If we try to do much more than that, we start running into scheduling problems. And there's Christmas and summer vacation and like Easter. And these are usually about 1 month or 2 months, and the typical length of stay is shorter than we would like. The median is somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks. We would like that to be a longer period, I think. Then I mentioned, well, each of these programs, most of them actually have some sort of workshop associated with them as a focus event. But in addition to that, we organize somewhere between 5 and 7, or we are involved in the organization of. We don't organize this, all of them single-handedly. And then, for the winter and summer schools, we have started what I hope will be a long tradition, is the Nodita Winter School on theoretical physics. We have had 2 rounds so far. We rotate the topics. The first one was on astrophysical dynamo theory. We had then one this winter on condensed matter physics, frontiers in condensed matter physics. And then the next year school, Paolo and Troels are organizing on, this is particle physics, so the standard model and beyond. And then in addition to this, we would like to have maybe 1 summer school. Not necessarily be organized here. Those are more irregular. And then we also have a summer school every other year for more junior, for undergraduates who are just beginning to get seriously interested in physics. And then we try to have a 1-week school where they have the opportunity to see some lectures by active researchers. Okay, and then we have the visitor program. Let me show you some data on all of these things. This is the number of papers in our preprint archive, and you can sort of read our history a little bit there. This starts in '95, and the level was pretty stable here, sort of around 70, 80 papers per year. Now some of these are written by our visitors, that's true, but most of these papers are written by in-house staff. And then there was a little bit of a spike here in 2000, I'm not quite sure why that is, but I guess it's fluctuations in relatively small numbers, but But then, of course, you see a big dip here when the institute was moved. This is 2006 and 7, which is the years when it was set up. But you'll see that we are recovering from that quite quickly. And we had promised to go beyond 100 papers per year in some, before some, I think as part of the contract, there were certain goals set for the Institute and the contract with the Council of Ministers, and we were going to surpass 100 papers in our archive next year. And we already did it last year, so I think we can be happy with the volume at least. And now, of course, the question is whether somebody reads all these papers. Is something which is harder to document. All right. So these are the preprinted. Now, another thing, of course, to take into account here, you should, of course, normalize these things by the size of the institute. And the institute over here actually had more people working at it than the institute does over here. It had both more postdocs and more senior people over here.
The linear rise, does it correspond to increasing people since 2007?
I believe so. Now, of course, I hesitate to extrapolate this. I would expect it to level off. In fact, indications this year are that it's going to be quite comparable to last year. Now, there's some of this, of course, is because of the program activity. There's a fraction of these papers here were submitted to the archive by people. It is a work that was done in a program, not by Notita scientists. So, anyway, one shouldn't be too much into these numbers, but I think it's encouraging at least the sign of the derivative here. Okay, now this is a bit of a busy slide, and that's to give you an impression. This is basically a list of the programs this year and next year. And we already have a list for most of 2013, but I didn't include that here. And maybe the thing to take away from this is, first of all, that we are running quite a number of programs, but secondly, that there's quite a variety here in the sort of things that these programs are about. We have, this is a program on cosmology, then we move to network theory and complex systems. The predictability is a combination of, well, it's actually astrophysics and meteorology. Then it's string theory, then we go back to dynamo theory, and then time-dependent processes in quantum physics. This is actually an experimental group here at Stockholm University that's sponsoring this. Then we go to more statistical mechanics and biophysics here, back to string theory. So you see, it's quite a broad range. You will also see that, of course, Notita people are quite prominent among the organizers. That's a natural thing because first of all, we encourage all our faculty to propose programs, and also when external groups are interested in having programs here, they often try to hook up with a local person just to make things work more smoothly in terms of the actual organization of the program. Okay, I'll give you a little bit of statistics here on the so who's actually coming to these things. So here's for the programs. We have a database of visitors. So we came online more or less in spring 2009. So that's as far back as we can go. And I took it through the end of last year. And you'll see things which are perhaps not so surprising. 40% of the program participants roughly is from the Nordic countries. And of that, there's a large concentration from Sweden. This is, of course, because it's convenient for local scientists here to actually sign up for programs to get the information about them. So it's not that we are flying in or bringing in on the train all these people here. A lot of them are already here, simply interacting with the programs here. But it does also show that this activity has an impact on the local environment here. I think that's clear. And then you see that there is, again, perhaps not surprising, that there's a significant chunk that comes from Europe, this is mostly, well, US and Canada here, and then a little bit. But we also do have participants coming from Japan, from China, quite far afield. So this is the programs. And I forgot to put in here, but the total number for participants in here, I believe, was some just under 700. This is programs for almost about 12 programs, I believe, that we have included in here. Then we have workshop participants. Those are basically things which are not parts of programs. And the distribution is similar, but you'll notice, for example, that Sweden is less represented here, but that's partly because these workshops tend to have more people coming in, so the locals don't figure quite as prominently in the numbers. But again, this is I think, again, a comparable number, or maybe slightly more actually that we are talking about here. And then we have the regular scientific visits. So that's not just sort of the ID. And here we're also talking about a couple of hundred people in this period. So that's actually quite a large program. 150, I think, sorry. And you'll see that there the Nordic countries are, now the Sweden does not show up so prominently because when we have visitors coming locally, they don't even make it into the database. Okay, let me just wrap up here in a few words about how things were set up here. So we have a board that is board members that come from each of the Nordic countries, so the 5 Nordic countries. And then there's a chairperson. Now, these board members, and I guess this is important for how the Institute works, that it is actually quite independent. It's owned by the universities, but they have taken very much a hands-off approach. And they let us run our show very much. So they are nominated by the research councils in their individual countries, but then but the decision, of course, appointment is made by the universities. And the board does the sort of thing that boards do. They set the policy and they oversee the budget and how we spend our funding. They also decide on which positions get announced and have the final word on all the appointments, except for these professorships that I talked about before, because that's a more complicated story with the universities being involved. Although Nordita actually nominates a majority of the appointment committee. And that's quite important. They also nominate the director, who is then joined. So basically the board selects the director. And well, then we have a scientific advisory committee. But we also have advice and input from some Nordic committees. And mostly what they do is they help us deal with the application we get for postdocs and positions. Now, I didn't go through that, but another sign that the Institute is on its way to being settled here is that the number of applications for our postdoctoral fellowships has been growing quite rapidly. 3 years ago we had 150 applications. The year after that they were 350. Last season they were over 400. This growth, and at the same time the number of Nordic applicants has stayed roughly constant in this. So you could say that the fraction of applicants coming from the Nordic countries is getting smaller. If you then look at the fellows themselves, the ones that we actually recruit, there is a bias in that we seem to be better able to attract people that have some connection already with the Nordic countries. So if you look at those of our fellows who are either Nordic citizens, who have PhDs from the Nordic countries, or have previously been employed in the Nordic countries, that is roughly half of the fellows. That has happened without any special measures. That is simply how the cards have played themselves. So that I would say when we are making these appointments, they are scientific quality is absolutely the overriding one, and then obviously we also want to have a spread of people in different fields, so that comes in also. Now this is done in collaboration with these research committees, but it's the faculty and the director that decide on the appointments at the end of the day, and then subject to approval by the board. Okay. All right. I think I will spare you then any discussion of our finances. Now we can go into that during some discussion sessions. I had a couple of slides here, which I more or less expected not to get to. But let me though show you here. Here's our, this is the current Novita board. And you'll be seeing some, but not all of them, tomorrow and later today. So there is one from each country, and there's also a reserve member. And usually the reserve members are called to board meetings also. And this, of course, is also a group of active scientists whose expertise we draw on. We have a fairly small, in fact, many would say very small administrative staff. We have the chief administrator, Daniela, who's sitting back there. We have in a 75% position assistant manager. We have Hans, who does web and computing support. He's at the back of the room. Helle Gielerich helps us out a lot in Copenhagen, although she is really employed by the news. She was the chief administrator of the institute in Copenhagen. And then we have Anne Ida, who's an administrator here. Now, of course, when we are starting programs or we have a lot of things going on, this is not enough. And then we do have a group of very good assistants who are master students here at the universities in physics, and they help us a lot. Okay. So I think I'll just leave this slide on. This gives you an idea of what we use the funding for. I can certainly answer questions, and we can go into it some later stage. But I think it's a good idea if we let us stop here and make way for the presentation of the groups. But if you have quick questions, what's happening?
So for scientific programs, do you have any means of evaluating and getting the feedback from the participants and things like that?
Yes, we do that. We have actually we've developed now online surveys that are sent. This was a huge improvement over the paper forms. We used to distribute paper forms to our participants, which they would then lose before they ever fill them in. Now, at the end of each program, shortly afterwards, everybody gets sent a fairly quick online survey, and we can show you samples of feedback that we've gotten from recent programs. We ask some general questions about what they thought of the scientific content, but also of how things are working in general. That's been quite useful to get that. I also did not go into details about it, but we also have a procedure for selecting which programs are run. We have a program committee, which is international, and so there's a call for proposals. It's a fairly simple proposal that people, and there are what I hope are clear guidelines for what people should put into those proposals. They are then sent to a committee which evaluates them and makes a ranking and recommendation to but the decision is then with the Novita board. This is a process that takes about 2 or 3 months to go through. The proposals are due in December, and we usually have a decision by February.
So has the reaction been positive to the way the programs are organized?
I think so. Yes, we've had.
Why do people choose to stay for such short times?
Well, my guess is that it's partly it's pressures from other parts of their life. Maybe it's also partly because we let them. We've not been hard-nosed about insisting on longer stays. I would imagine it's a combination of the two.
I imagine for longer stays you'd need red salary,
Certainly if it was going to be more than, if we were going to count them in months, and that we're not able to do.
Do you have any way of monitoring the relative success of the programs by counting publications or any other way?
Well, one way is, of course, a highly subjective way is, of course, these surveys. At least we will know whether the participants felt it was a success. Then we can keep track of, but it varies a lot between the organizers. Some organizers impress on their participants to use the Novita archive, for example, to put their papers there. So it's hard to compare between programs. Another thing which is kind of hard to maybe follow, but maybe one should be able to do it somewhere, is to look for acknowledgement sections in papers, because we do ask people if they feel that the stay here was important to the development of some work that would be mentioned. But it's only if a very significant part of it was done that we ask people, we suggest to people that they put it on the archive or even include a joint affiliation, which they can if they wish. But I think it would be very interesting if we could figure out a way to go back, for example, a year after and see, maybe get back, and then with this online capability, I guess, at the risk of annoying our customers, we could go back after a year and ask them to assess again whether this had been a successful program.
Yeah, I know that's done by the Newton Institute, for example. Can be useful. The danger is, of course, the scientific program is just a series of workshops if you've got such short participation.
This is true, and I think also there's a further danger that if you have a group of organizers, they may even split that short period up into even shorter. And we need to be on our toes to discourage that. Okay, so I think we'll then move on to the next item.